Hey guys, tonight we drift into a story that smells of river mud and ancient incense, where the air hangs heavy with moisture, and the only light is the silver shimmer of moonlight on slow-moving water. You're barefoot on warm silt, and in the distance something pulses, a glow beneath the Nile's surface. The locals call it the Palace of the Underwater King. Now, you probably wouldn't survive this little adventure in real life. For one, the crocodiles alone would make quick work of you. Also, the palace is supposedly submerged in a part of the Nile where the current pulls stronger than family gossip. But here, you're safe, tucked into bed, just a curious time traveler drifting into Nubian legend. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean it. No pressure. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where my sleepy historians are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step into the reeds, and the world changes. It's around 700 BCE, and you're somewhere deep in the ancient kingdom of Kush, south of Egypt, in what is today northern Sudan. The Nile is the lifeblood of this place, and if the stories are true, home to a ruler no textbook bothers to mention. He doesn't have a pyramid. There's no gold mask bearing his likeness. But there's a whisper, a low murmur carried on the river wind, that a king once lived beneath these waters. Not metaphorically, literally. Beneath the surface, on a throne carved from white hippo tusk and guarded by talking fish. You squint through the mist, and there it is, the faint outline of a stone gate just under the water, half swallowed by lilies. The entrance to a submerged throne room. Or maybe it's just an oddly shaped rock. Archaeologists still debate whether this structure was part of a ceremonial dock or something wetter. You wade forward anyway. The water laps against your knees, warm and sluggish. Something brushes against your ankle. It could be a plant, could also be a catfish, or the king's pet. You keep walking, the riverbed firm and strangely clean of debris, almost like someone, or something, sweeps it. Every 5 or 6 steps you notice carved stones underfoot, worn by time but unmistakably man-made. Spirals, crocodiles, tiny hand-sized suns. One stone even has a little pair of eyes staring upward, wide and unblinking, comforting. You take a breath, or try to. The air down here is thick, like soup. Warm, earthy soup with hints of clay, fish, and maybe roasted garlic. Could be hallucinations from low oxygen, or the smell of ancient feasts drifting up from below. You take a breath, or try to. The air down here is thick, like soup. Warm, earthy soup with hints of clay, fish, and maybe roasted garlic? Could be hallucinations from low oxygen, or the smell of ancient feasts drifting up from below. According to fringe accounts, the kind that make mainstream historians gently sigh, there once lived a king who rejected the dryness of land and declared his loyalty to the water spirits. He walked into the Nile and never came back. Instead, he built a palace below the reeds, married a serpent, and was crowned king of the submerged court. The story's origin? Possibly adapted from older fertility myths. Or maybe just a tale spun by river traders after too much date wine. You hear something now, not a voice, more like a rhythm. Gentle, steady. A heartbeat? Number drums. Underwater drums. The king, as legend has it, holds midnight audiences. No invitations required. He waits for travelers brave, or sleep-deprived, enough to follow the current and find him. Few make it past the crocodile totems. We'll get to those in a moment. But you're curious. And this is, after all, a dream. You walk farther in, The reeds part. The moon hits the water just right, and for a breathless moment you see it. A flicker of light beneath the surface, like the glint off polished obsidian. A window, maybe, or just the water teasing you again. Some scholars argue these legends reflect an early understanding of the Nile's cycles. The river, rising and falling with such predictability, it must have seemed alive. Maybe the king is just the spirit of the flood, given a face, a name, and for some reason, gills. You kneel. The water's now chest high. A small fish bumps your arm and swims off without apology. You reach down and touch the silt. It's warm. Not like sun-warmed, but internally warm, like the ground is alive. Just ahead, a carved pillar juts from the river. It's covered in barnacles, but you can still make out the inscription. A crowned figure stands arms wide, surrounded by waves. Below his feet, fish with human eyes. You'd ask questions, but the river's getting louder. You close your eyes and listen. Drums, laughter, a low chant that sounds like a lullaby hummed by something with gills. The legend of the underwater king might be nonsense. Or maybe he's just waiting for the right visitor to sit beside his throne. You take another step forward. Your foot slips a little and you steady yourself on a smooth, slick stone. You're now waist deep, the water cool at first, then oddly warm around the knees again. It's like the river can't decide whether it wants you comfortable or on edge. You breathe slow and deep, not because you're scared, okay, maybe a little, but because the Nile demands that kind of reverence. She's not just a river here. She's a presence, a sudden ripple. Something darts just beneath the surface, fast, purposeful, the size of a very ambitious eel. You pretend you didn't see it. Smart move. Your hands brush past river grass, long and silky, and somewhere to your left, there's a flash of color, blue, deep cobalt, not natural for a fish, not this far inland. You follow the movement instinctively, pushing the reeds aside until you come face to face with something surprising. A statue, half submerged. It's worn and crooked, leaning like it's halfway through a drunken story. The figure is humanoid, but its eyes are comically oversized, and its hands, webbed, like it was carved by someone who once tried to describe a human after only meeting frogs. One arm holds what might be a scepter, or maybe it's a giant fishbone. Hard to say. The other points downward, as if guiding you below. Of course it does. The Nubians, your ancient neighbors here in Kush, had a thing for water spirits. They weren't just symbolic. These beings were respected, feared, bribed, and blamed, depending on how the crops turned out. Every drought, angry water gods, every flood, slightly happier ones. There's even evidence that river-related deities were given offerings of beer, bread, and sometimes small animals, preferably already deceased. This statue, though, is different, less elegant than Egyptian design, more personal. The way the cheeks bulge out like the figure's holding its breath. It's either trying to warn you, or it's been underwater for way too long. Either way, it's working. You can't look away. Fringe theories, the kind your high school history teacher would roll their eyes at, suggest the Nubians may have believed in an entire society beneath the Nile. Not just a kingdom, but markets, schools, even underwater musicians who played instruments carved from pearl and crocodile bone. One account from an early Greek traveler mentions a tribe that speaks with bubbles. Take that as you will. You crouch lower, placing a hand on the statue's head. It hums, like gently. You're not imagining it. It's a soft, pulsing vibration, like a cat's purr filtered through stone. You jerk your hand back. Behind you, a breeze picks up, rustling the reeds with a dry, whispery sound that almost resembles words. The kind of thing you'd hear right before making a bad decision in a horror movie. But you? You step forward anyway. The water deepens suddenly. Now it's at your ribs, cool again, and the ground slopes downward in a steady descent. The path feels carved, intentional, like someone made it for people with very specific gill-based requirements. You shuffle forward. Up ahead, a ring of totems comes into view. 8 in total. Short, stumpy, each carved from black stone and worn into absurd little shapes. One has a turtle head, another has what might be a goat's body and a parrot's beak. The third is just an egg. Like, literally an egg with tiny feet. What fever dream designed these? You step inside the ring. The air changes. No wind, no bugs, no sound except for your own breath, and that weird distant thumping, the drums, still going strong. Inside the ring, the water is glassy, perfectly still, even though just a few steps back, it was sloshing like soup during an earthquake. You glance down. The water here is clearer than before, almost unnatural. You can see straight to the bottom, where smooth tiles form a circle. And in the center of that, a hole. Number A well. A deep, stone-lined pit leading downward into darkness. You know what's coming next. The legend goes like this. If you find the ring of totems and stand still long enough, the water opens. And if your intentions are pure, or at least mildly interesting, the king will allow you passage. Of course, the story conveniently leaves out how to stand still in chest-high water without floating around like a confused manatee. Still, you try. You plant your feet. You breathe slowly. The water around the well begins to bubble. At first, it's just a few lazy gurgles. Then it boils, rapidly, as if something below is getting impatient. You blink. The well is gone. Or rather, it's opened, wider now, stretching like a mouth. The stone rim glows faintly blue, the same cobalt as that mystery fish earlier. You don't remember walking forward, but suddenly you're peering into the shaft. It doesn't look like water anymore. It looks like mist. Dense, swirling, not obeying the usual rules of fluid physics. You should be terrified. And maybe you are. But also, you're intrigued. Because this is how stories begin. You lean in, just a little. A breath of wind blows from below, carrying with it the scent of lotus and something unmistakably spicy, like cardamom soaked in river brine. It hits your senses with a strange nostalgia, like you've smelled it before in a dream. The totems hum just like the statue. The drums go silent. The air pulses. Then a voice. Low. Male. Amused. Well, it's about time. You freeze. No one told you the king had a sense of sarcasm. You nearly slip because hearing voices from beneath the Nile was not in your original plan. You'd expected maybe a vision, a symbol, a minor hallucination, not full-blown sarcastic dialogue. The water below doesn't ripple, and the mist within the well remains unnervingly still, like it's waiting. Well, the voice repeats, you're not just going to stand there like a flamingo at a dinner party, are you? That's oddly specific, but it also kind of tracks. You take a slow breath. Your ribs tighten from the pressure of the cool water, and your fingers are pruny already. You've been out here longer than you thought, but the presence, the one speaking to you from beneath the river, doesn't sound threatening. More like someone who's been stuck at the bottom of a very ancient stairwell, waiting for company for a few centuries. You murmur, "Who are you?" A deep chuckle vibrates through the water and the stone beneath your feet. Ah, finally. A question worthy of the moment. Okay, that's not an answer. But the Nubians were known for riddles and elaborate ceremonial games. A normal greeting might be too boring for someone who claims to rule underwater. A few mainstream historians suggest that Nubian rulers, particularly those of the Kingdom of Kush, held divine status among their people, not just as political leaders, but as spiritual mediators between the earthly and the divine. Many were buried with elaborate underwater-themed iconography, river plants, fish, serpents, and boats not meant for sailing, but for the afterlife's mysterious wetlands. The fringe theory, your favorite, of course, claims at least one king didn't die at all. He transformed, dissolved into water, and reconstituted himself as something else, something wetter. And rumor has it he's been chatting with the occasional dreamer ever since. "I've had many names," the voice says, as though answering your unspoken thought. "Some called me Tabir, others whispered King of the Deep. One traveling poet called me that handsome bastard who sank." A pause. I liked her. You try not to smile. Whatever this is, dream, memory, supernatural accident, it's got charm. You take another cautious step toward the glowing well. The tiles under your feet are slick with river slime, but there's a surprising stability to them, like they're part of something older and stronger than anything built on land. Why me? You ask. Because let's face it, it's the most obvious question when you're halfway through a mythological awakening. The voice sighs, long and theatrical. Because you came barefoot. Because you didn't run from the statue. Because you saw the egg with feet and didn't laugh. And because, let's be honest, you're curious. Even if your common sense is clearly on vacation. Fair enough. You glance down into the shaft. The mist thickens slightly, then thins, parting like curtains. Below, for just a moment, you see movement. Not fish, not shadows, something human-shaped, and many of them. A city, stone buildings, glowing faintly like embers under ash. Long kelp-like plants drifting lazily between rooftops, figures walking or floating through streets paved with luminous shells. It's not just a legend, it's a full-blown underwater civilization. And at the center of it all, a massive throne carved from coral, fossil, and something metallic that reflects light in wrong directions. On it sits a figure with impossibly long arms and eyes that glow just a touch too brightly for comfort. He looks up, directly at you. You jolt back, but the image fades again, leaving only swirling mist and a weird, damp warmth on your neck. Archaeologists still debate whether the Nubian underworld was metaphorical or literal, the voice says, almost bored. I'm here to confirm it's absolutely literal. Metaphors don't have plumbing. You blink. There's plumbing? Oh yes, the king says. We have hot springs, saltwater toilets, and a surprisingly competitive synchronized swimming team. He looks up, directly at you. You jolt back, but the image fades again, leaving only swirling mist and a weird damp warmth on your neck. Archaeologists still debate whether the Nubian underworld was metaphorical or literal, the voice says, almost bored. I'm here to confirm it's absolutely literal. Metaphors don't have plumbing. You blink. There's plumbing? Oh yes, the king says. We have hot springs, saltwater toilets, and a surprisingly competitive synchronized swimming team. You snort, unable to help yourself. Somewhere, your inner historian is screaming. But another part of you, the tired, sleep-deprived part, is deeply soothed by the ridiculousness of it all. Will you come down then? The king asks. It's perfectly safe. Mostly. Mostly? You hesitate. The mist parts again, this time forming a winding path of stairs, glowing, solid, and definitely not a normal feature of your local riverbed. Come on, the voice urges, lighter now. You've already gotten wet. Might as well dive all the way in. You step forward. The moment your foot touches the first step, everything changes. The cold water becomes warm and fizzing. like a soft bath filled with invisible bubbles. Your ears pop, the air thickens, but you can still breathe. Somehow, the world above fades, reeds, riverbank, the memory of dry land, all replaced by an underwater glow, a low musical hum, and the scent of something ancient and floral. Lotus and leather, cinnamon bark soaked in silt. You descend. Step after step, the city reveals itself. You're not dreaming. Or if you are, it's the kind of dream that might never let you wake. And at the bottom of the stairwell, a figure waits. Not the king. Not yet. Just a woman with hair that drifts in slow waves and skin like river stone. She smiles. "You must be the surface dweller," she says. "He's been talking about you for centuries." You blink. "Me? I'm not even wearing pants." She shrugs. "Neither are we." Fair point. You step off the last glowing stair and onto something that feels like polished clay. Smooth and firm, but warm beneath your feet as if the earth itself is humming a lullaby. The underwater city rises all around you now, its coral bone buildings pulsing softly with internal light, like jellyfish that decided real estate was a better gig. Everything is in motion, but gently, dreamily, a world suspended in a slow dance. You look up. Above you, the water refracts the last hints of the surface world like a stained glass ceiling. Fish glide overhead like sleepy comets. Occasionally, a pocket of air escapes from some invisible vent and drifts lazily to the surface in a burp of ancient breath. The woman beside you, she still hasn't given her name, gestures forward. "Come." He doesn't like to be kept waiting. "Should I bow?" you ask, only half joking. "He prefers finger guns," she replies, and the look on her face is dead serious. Okay then, you walk through the streets of the submerged city. The buildings are tall and strangely curved, some with terraces holding underwater gardens of waving moss and phosphorescent flowers. A pair of children, or child-shaped water spirits, you can't really tell, float past, blowing bubbles that make the faint sound of bells when they pop. You pass what appears to be a market stall, but instead of goods, the vendor offers dreams, little swirling orbs of memory trapped in seashells. He holds one up, a childhood bicycle ride, seen through someone else's eyes. You raise an eyebrow and he grins with shark teeth. A scholarly fact. The Nubians were master traders, controlling vast stretches of the Nile and forging routes deep into sub-Saharan Africa. They dealt in gold, ivory, incense, and even trained elephants. Some archaeologists now believe they also had sophisticated religious rituals based on dreams, with dream interpreters considered high priests. Did this market represent that tradition? Or are you now inside a very elaborate metaphor with surprisingly convincing fish? Archaeologists still debate whether these rituals were purely symbolic or genuinely believed to summon ancestral spirits, your mysterious escort says, reading your thoughts like a menu. But here, belief tends to make things real. You turn a corner and nearly trip over an eel in a hat. It nods solemnly. You nod back, because that feels polite. At last, you reach the palace, if you can call it that. It's less a building and more a coral reef that decided to host a royal court. The structure twists upward like a nautilus shell, its exterior covered in carvings that shimmer when you don't look directly at them. You feel watched, but not threatened. Just noticed. The woman turns to you. "He'll speak to you alone now. Just remember, don't mention hippos." "Why?" "He's touchy about them. Something involving a boat race, an ex-girlfriend, and an embarrassing poem." "Good to know." You push open a heavy curtain of kelp and step inside, and there he is. The king of the deep sits on his throne of coral, his form both regal and faintly ridiculous. He's tall, with eyes like submerged lanterns, but he's wearing a cloak made entirely of woven seagrass and inexplicably fuzzy slippers. "You've made it," he booms, then immediately drops into a whispery voice. "Sorry, palace acoustics are unpredictable. Welcome." You bow, despite yourself. You don't know what protocol is down here, but bowing feels safe. He leans forward, steepling his fingers. "You have questions." "You do. So many. But they bottleneck in your throat, because now that you're here, standing in front of him, you realize the strangeness isn't just about underwater cities or talking coral. It's about how familiar he feels. "You're not from the surface," you say slowly. "Not anymore." "Correct," he says. "But I was once. I walked deserts, rode elephants, lost a sandal in a very undignified way during a storm." "Then why stay?" His smile softens. "Because down here, stories last longer. Up there, a man dies, and in 100 years he's a footnote. Down here, I get to be the myth that won't shut up." You look around. "And this place?" "A refuge for memory," he says. "A city built on forgotten names, half-remembered lullabies, and the silence between drum beats. It's not for everyone. But you? You're curious. Curious enough to listen when the river talks." You shift uneasily. "I didn't mean to find this." "No one ever does," he replies. "But some are meant to." He stands, and the water around him seems to lift him slightly. His cloak ripples like slow fire. "I'll show you something," he says. "Something that doesn't belong to time." He steps off his throne and the kelp curtain peels open behind you. Outside, the city darkens. Not with fear, but like a theater dimming before a performance. In the distance, lights appear. A procession, led by figures in long robes, holding lanterns that glow like bottled lightning. The king nods toward them. "Come. It's the festival of the vanished. It happens once every 1,000 years, give or take." You follow, barefoot and bewildered, past whispering ruins and serenading eels, toward a mystery too old for maps and too weird for textbooks. Just another night in the kingdom beneath the Nile. You trail behind the king, your toes brushing the seabed with each step, raising tiny clouds of glowing sand. The Festival of the Vanished. The name alone sends a shiver of fascination up your spine. Around you, the underwater city holds its breath. Even the fish seem to slow, as if they too are preparing for something solemn, or at the very least, mildly dramatic. The procession is already underway. Figures float forward in silence, each cloaked in long flowing fabrics that shimmer like wet parchment. Their faces are hidden behind delicate masks, some carved from ivory, others painted with blue pigment, one looking suspiciously like a grumpy owl. One figure even has a giant clamshell as a hat, and you're honestly a little jealous. You lean closer to the king. "So, Festival of the Vanished. Sounds a bit ominous." "It's not," he says. "It's melancholic, but in a sexy, mysterious way." "Like a jazz funeral?" "Exactly," he whispers, "but wetter." You reach a circular plaza, its floor made of thousands of flat river stones, each one carved with a single Nubian name, names long forgotten on land, but remembered here, whispered by the currents like bedtime stories for ghosts. The king lifts his hands. The procession halts. From somewhere, a drumbeat begins, soft, distant, like a heartbeat just beneath your own. Then the chanting starts. The language is ancient, older than the pyramids, older than your best guess. You don't understand a word, but it doesn't matter. It sinks into you, low and resonant, like the warm press of a blanket over your shoulders. Mainstream historical fact time, Nubia, or the Kingdom of Kush, had its own script, Meroitic, which still hasn't been fully deciphered. It was used in inscriptions all over their empire, and yet today, linguists remain baffled by large portions of it. Imagine a whole civilization leaving behind elegant stone post-it notes and no one knowing how to read them. Classic ancient power move. The fringe detail? Some fringe scholars, the ones who probably drink too much herbal tea and own at least one cursed flute, believe that Meroitic wasn't meant to be read by the living. They think it was a spirit language, readable only through dreams or trance states. Down here, as the chanting pulses in sync with the glowing shells, you could almost believe it. Archaeologists still debate whether the Festival of the Vanished represents a real ritual or a metaphorical cycle of memory, the king says softly, watching the procession as if it's a home video. Some say it's connected to the flooding of the Nile. Others think it's just a really good excuse to wear masks. The masked figures begin to circle the plaza, each placing a small object on the stone floor. A carved bone comb, a sliver of obsidian, a bird-shaped amulet, even a mummified mango, which, frankly, raises more questions than answers. You wonder what these offerings represent. Memories? Apologies? Recipes? A little girl, maskless, steps forward next. She carries a pot of still water and pours it slowly into the center of the plaza, letting it flood over the carved names. As the water spreads, each name begins to glow faintly, one by one, as if they're waking up from a long nap. You hear whispers now, not creepy horror movie whispers, but soft conversations, snippets of forgotten stories, someone arguing about goat prices, a lullaby sung off-key, a very enthusiastic ode to pomegranate wine. This is why we do it, the king murmurs, so the dead can gossip one last time. A moment later, the ground begins to shift. Not tremble, shift. The entire plaza rotates, like a giant lazy Susan for ancestral memory. The glowing water at its center deepens, forming a shallow pool where reflections begin to rise that don't match anyone present. You see faces, hundreds of them, smiling, weeping, sneezing. Someone really should have covered their nose, caught in moments snatched from centuries. The king watches with a soft smile. They come back, just for tonight. You glance down at the water and see a reflection you don't recognize. A woman, strong, sun-darkened, wearing heavy earrings and a wicked grin. She blinks up at you and raises one eyebrow like she knows all your secrets. You knew her, you ask? She was my sister, the king replies. She once arm-wrestled a lion. Lost, but it was close. You knew her, you ask? She was my sister, the king replies. She once arm-wrestled a lion. Lost, but it was close. The water shifts again, and the plaza begins to still. The procession ends where it began. Each masked figure bows, not to the king, but to the memories now gently sinking back into the floor. One by one, the glowing names fade. The plaza is quiet again. A gentle bell chimes. Time for drinks, you ask, trying to lighten the mood. The king nods. Time for the library. Of course, because nothing says ancient aquatic closure like a good underwater scroll session. You follow him once more, leaving the plaza behind, still warm from ancestral laughter. As you walk, you glance back at the little girl with the pot. She's looking right at you now, smiling. And then she vanishes, leaving only a single silver fish that flicks its tail once, like a wink, and swims away. The path to the library is less of a corridor and more of a submerged gorge, flanked on either side by coral-covered arches and root-like stalactites that shimmer like sugar glass. Tiny bioluminescent creatures flutter around your head like distracted fairies, and the silence between you and the king feels comfortable, like old pajamas and a cup of warm date milk. The library isn't what you expect. You were imagining scrolls, papyrus, maybe a few dusty clay tablets, a dramatic librarian with attitude and a dramatic bun. Instead, it looks like a cave made entirely of amber. Shelves curve into the rock itself, each holding what appears to be bubbles. Hundreds of floating memory bubbles drift lazily in currents of thought, tethered only by silk-thin strands that hum if you get too close. This, the king says, is where we keep the good stuff. You reach toward a bubble and it suddenly expands, swelling with a pop of sensation. You don't see a scene. You feel it, the sharp dryness of sand in your throat, the exhilaration of sprinting after a gazelle, the unbearable itch of too tight sandals. It's not memory like we know it. It's memory like a fever dream. The king grins. Careful, some of them bite. A drift of bubbles nearby begins to swirl into a pattern, a kind of choreography in memory. You lean in and catch glimpses. A young boy shouting spells at a crocodile, an old woman stirring ink with her toe, a priest trying to train fish to carry messages, not terribly successfully. Mainstream historians tend to ignore Nubia's oral libraries, the king says, as he gestures to the bubbles. But that's where most of the fun lived. Facts are great, but stories? Stories have teeth. You nod, still slightly dizzy from whatever that gazelle sprint was. And what about written records? Stuff archaeologists can frame and squint at? Oh sure, he says. We had those too. Our temples at Napata and Meroe were covered in inscriptions. But underwater, we don't carve in stone. We preserve in memory. A new bubble brushes against your shoulder and bursts open like a soap dream. You suddenly remember someone else's wedding, the taste of roasted goat, a crown of lotus petals, your new in-laws giving you the side eye like they know you stole something. You did. You wobble a bit. That felt illegal, the king chuckles. No laws against empathy theft here. Archaeologists still debate whether these memory chambers were symbolic or literal, he adds. Some say the underwater kingdom was just a poetic metaphor for death. Others know better. You glance at him. And you're one of the others? Oh, honey, he says, pulling a bubble from the shelf like a wine bottle. I'm the original other. He pops the bubble gently, and a story begins to unfold. This one visual, projected across the amber walls like a watery IMAX show. It's the tale of a queen, tall, barefoot, riding a giant catfish like a chariot. Her voice commands storms. Her eyes are gold. She wins battles by dancing until the enemy gets confused and drops their spears. The king looks wistful. She was real and absolutely terrifying. Once bit a Greek diplomat. She sounds like my type. You both laugh, and in that moment, the whole room brightens, not from the bubbles, but from the shared warmth of ridiculous history. You turn a corner and discover a smaller chamber filled with musical memory bubbles. As each one bursts, a new melody begins, some rhythmic and deep, others light and chaotic like someone arguing with a tambourine. You composed songs underwater, you ask? Why not? The king shrugs. Sound travels differently here, so we play differently. Our flutes were made from bird bones, and we trained sea snails to hum the bass line. You squint. Sea snails? Okay, that part might be exaggerated. One particularly stubborn bubble refuses to burst. The king nudges it with his elbow, and it flares open, revealing a moment of his own childhood. Him racing through kelp forest with a fish spear, missing every single shot but grinning wildly anyway. He seems embarrassed. I was the worst hunter in my class. My teacher called me King of Aimlessness. You raise an eyebrow. So naturally, you became a king. Exactly. I figured if I couldn't catch dinner, I'd at least throw a good party. The two of you walk deeper into the archive, passing rows of memory arranged by color, scent, or mood. Some feel like jealousy. Others taste like nutmeg. One glows suspiciously, like mild regret. All of them hum with the quiet dignity of things once lived. You pause at a particularly old section. The bubbles here are darker, heavier. They drift slowly, like thoughts no one wants to finish. "What's in these?" you whisper. The king's smile fades just a notch. Regrets, warnings, the stuff we carry but don't always show. You reach for one. He catches your wrist. "Maybe not tonight," he says gently. "They have sharp edges." Instead, he offers you a smaller bubble, lighter, translucent, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. You take it, and for a moment, you feel yourself floating on the surface of the Nile, watching stars blink above you like the eyes of old gods, as if they're watching, waiting, maybe even humming along. The sensation passes. You're back in the library, surrounded by drifting stories and ancient echoes. The king stretches. "All right, enough sentimentality. I think it's time for a fish snack and a minor prophecy." Like a full-blown prophecy or more of a horoscope situation? Somewhere in between, just enough to make you paranoid. You follow him out of the chamber, the memory bubbles trailing behind like sleepy fireflies, and the last song lingers in your ears, soft, strange, and somehow familiar. The corridor winds upward now, like a lazy spiral drawn by a tipsy eel. The walls shift from polished amber to a more chalky blue. Less memory chamber, more dream hallway. The king, ever barefoot and oddly dry for someone who lives underwater, hums a tune under his breath that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby with lyrics about tax evasion. You trail behind him, ducking under a root arch that looks like it's been braided by hand, or tentacle. A school of tiny translucent fish drifts by. One pauses to inspect your earlobe, decides you're not interesting enough, and swims off with passive-aggressive fins. "So," you ask, stretching your legs a bit, "about that fish snack and a minor prophecy?" The king grins. "First the snack. Never prophesy on an empty stomach." He leads you into a round chamber, soft lit by pulsating algae in shades of lavender and melon. In the center floats a low stone slab covered in dishes that defy physics and good judgment, jelly cubes that sing when chewed, purple roots shaped like tiny pyramids, and slices of what can only be described as glowy bacon. You pick up a squiggly morsel that seems to be breathing. "What's this one?" Moon eel cartilage. Goes straight to your imagination. You pop it into your mouth and instantly imagine you're a camel. Then a cedar tree. Then just a concept, like the word almost. "Nice," you murmur, chewing carefully. The king plucks a bright orange wedge. "This one tells jokes if you chew with your mouth open." Pass. Mainstream historians say Nubians had a mostly grain-based diet, he explains as he nibbles on something that's probably illegal. "Lots of millet, lentils, dates, honey. But under here, we had access to a different kind of feast." You sip something fizzy and blue and immediately forget the names of 3 people you went to high school with. "What's in this?" Aquifer root, fermented fish thoughts, and a splash of Nile nostalgia. Sounds artisanal. The king wipes his fingers on a napkin made of dried lotus petals. "Now that you're adequately snackified, we consult the spiral oracle." He stands, claps his hands twice, and a panel in the wall dissolves into soft mist. Behind it, a slow whirlpool spins in place, not sucking or churning, just rotating calmly like it's meditating. "This is the spiral of Omran," he says, voice dropping an octave like a sleep podcast narrator. It speaks only to the full-bellied and open-minded. You approach the spiral. It hums, not audibly, More like it hums directly into your ribs. How's it work? You whisper. You breathe into it. Breathe into the whirlpool? Yes. Why? No idea, just tradition. You lean forward and exhale gently. The spiral pauses, then reverses direction, then shoots up a tiny bubble which bounces off your forehead with a faint plink and drifts toward the king. He catches it, inspects it with the gravitas of someone examining a rare gem, and nods. Ah, classic you. What's it say? He clears his throat. You will soon encounter a camel with emotional baggage. Do not engage. Its problems are not your problems. You stare at him. Seriously? It's metaphorical. Maybe. You glance back at the spiral. Archaeologists still debate whether oracles like this were ritualistic inventions or genuine divinatory devices. The king pats your shoulder, and this archaeologist says they're excellent for party games. He reaches into a side pouch of his robe and pulls out a small stone figure, a crocodile with a flute. This was carved by my great-uncle, who was mostly blind and mildly psychic. He said it keeps nightmares away, or attracts them. We never figured out which. You take the figurine. It's warm, possibly alive. You decide not to think about it too hard. As you move toward the next passage, a strange whistling echoes through the walls, low, lonely, like someone singing into a jar. The king pauses. That's the tunnel guardian. He gets cranky when ignored. You turn a corner and find a wall completely covered in handprints, some tiny, some massive, some faint and trembling. The king places his hand over one and nods. We leave pieces of ourselves here, the parts we don't need anymore. Jealousy, regret, that awkward thing we said at dinner 4 years ago. You press your palm to a blank spot on the wall. It tingles, like your hand is exhaling. I feel lighter. Yep, that's your cringe being recycled. You giggle. The sound echoes weirdly, like it doesn't want to leave the room. Moving on, the tunnels begin to slope downward, back toward deeper waters. The king walks in silence now, humming again. Something sadder, older. The passage narrows, and suddenly you're squeezing through a stone crevice barely wider than your shoulders. Claustrophobia kicks in, but so does the glow from your weird snack. You feel a strange calm settle over you, like your brain is wrapped in lavender and slow jazz. You emerge into a chamber with a single object in the center, a mirror made of obsidian, framed by lion teeth and braided reeds. What is it? You ask, wiping the sweat from your brow. A mirror that doesn't show your reflection. It shows the version of you you've forgotten. You stare. Nothing happens. Then slowly, a faint image forms. A version of you, younger maybe, holding a spear made of bone, standing ankle deep in the Nile, grinning like you've just wrestled a god and won. I don't remember this, but it remembers you. The king sighs. We collect so many selves across our lives. Some get left behind, but they never go far. You sit in silence, watching yourself fade and flicker in the glass. Eventually, the king stands. Time to meet the crocodiles. Friendly crocodiles? He gives a diplomatic shrug. They're not unfriendly. You follow him out, the mirror still glowing faintly behind you like it's waving goodbye. The tunnel curves again, this time into a wide chamber that smells of moss, wet stone, and something faintly minty, like a river that flosses. You hear them before you see them. The sound is unmistakable. The rhythmic splashes, the low rumble like someone clearing their throat underwater, and every now and then, a sharp, toothy chomp that sends a ripple through your insides. The crocodiles have arrived. The king waves cheerfully at the shadows shifting in the water. My cousins, he says, with an odd mix of reverence and resignation. They watch the lower thresholds, excellent memory, terrible manners. You inch closer to the water's edge. The pool is enormous, the size of a palace ballroom, and glows from below with eerie green light. Dozens of eyes peer back at you, bobbing just above the surface. Some blink in slow motion, like they're trying to decide whether you're friend, food, or just poorly dressed. You said they weren't unfriendly. They're mostly passive-aggressive. One of the larger beasts lumbers toward the shore, water sluicing off its plated back. It's wearing a necklace made of coins and dried fish tails. You stare. "This one's the accountant," the king says. You raise an eyebrow. "Crocodile, accountant." "Oh, yes. He tracks the emotional debts of those who pass through here. You'd be surprised how many people owe tears, apologies, or a decent poem." The crocodile lowers its massive snout, sniffs your knee, and emits a low grumble that could be approval or acid reflux. The king nods. He says you're carrying 3 apologies and a song you never finished. You look down, slightly guilty. "I meant to finish it." "Don't worry," the king says, patting your back. The threshold eats guilt faster than piranhas at a buffet. Mainstream historians might tell you crocodiles in ancient Nubia were feared and worshipped in equal measure, often associated with Sobek, the crocodile god from Egypt. But in this underwater city, they're not just divine, they're co-workers. You step carefully around the larger ones, trying not to trip over a tail the size of a canoe. One small croc scampers over with a flower in its mouth and presents it like a toddler demanding admiration. You coo. It snaps its jaws cheerfully and waddles away. The king chuckles. "That one bites ankles when ignored." You pass the test. The chamber's far wall shimmers, and from it emerges a ramp of smooth coral that leads downward again. Deeper still. The king gestures. "This way." The old dome is next. As you descend, you feel the pressure shift. Your ears pop gently, and the light takes on a bluish hue, like dusk settling in a temple. The walls here are covered in carvings, not of battles or kings, but of plants, bugs, lovers dancing, and someone attempting to wrestle a very large bird while wearing nothing but a feathered hat. "Everyday life," the king says wistfully. "We carved what we feared we'd forget." A fringe detail here. Some believe ancient Nubians used tattooing and scarification not just for beauty or status, but as a form of underwater memory. Patterns inked into the skin to tell stories to the river spirits. You spot one such design on the king's wrist. Concentric rings around a turtle. "What's this one?" "Ah, that's from when I lost a drinking contest to a snail." Never let a gastropod with 6 titles talk you into a 3rd round. You grin. "I won't." Finally, you reach the old dome. The air, if you can call it air, is thick with silence, heavy and calm like a library built by whales. The dome's ceiling stretches high, supported by massive stone pillars carved like twisted reeds. In the center stands a single artifact, a throne made of river glass and ancient ivory, floating 6 inches above a bed of glowing sand. The king walks slowly toward it and stops, looking not at the throne, but at the sand below. "This is where my father disappeared," he says softly. "Disappeared?" Poof, no ceremony, no farewell. Just walked into the light and never came back. Left me with the robe, the crown, and a mildly judgmental turtle. You step closer, careful not to disturb anything. "Did he die?" The king shakes his head. "Maybe. Maybe he transcended. Maybe he just got bored and swam off to start a jazz club in the Upper Nile." Archaeologists still debate whether such disappearances were symbolic rites of passage or literal events. He laughs gently. "I prefer the jazz club theory." The throne hums softly, as if recognizing someone nearby. You feel a tug in your chest. Not painful, just gravitational. Like your heart leaning forward. You want to sit? The king asks. You hesitate. Should I? Depends. Do you want to remember the version of yourself that once ruled dreams? A little. He nods solemnly. Then sit. You do. The moment you touch the throne, your vision expands. Not explodes, expands. Like stretching open a curtain you didn't know was there. You see flashes, rivers running backward, a crocodile reading poetry aloud, a woman with eyes like constellations smiling at you across a field of papyrus, and a voice, yours, maybe, whispering, "Remember the underwater king." The dome seems to breathe around you. Every carving flickers. Every pillar vibrates slightly. You are known here, even if you forgot. Eventually, the vision fades. You blink. The king is smiling, but there's something new behind it. Not sadness exactly, but recognition. You saw her, he says softly. I think I did. He helps you stand. Come on, we're almost at the bottom. You glance once more at the throne. It's empty again, quiet, floating, as always. Do you miss ruling? You ask. The king snorts. Not at all. Too much paperwork. Let's go see the memory whales. You follow, heart still echoing with images you don't quite understand, and maybe never will. The path narrows again, but this time it feels intentional. Not just architecture, but a ritual. You move forward shoulder first, scraping along coral-touched stone walls that hum faintly, like they're gossiping behind your back. The king doesn't speak for a while, and even the usual echo of dripping water seems to pause, as if holding its breath. Then you hear it. A low, melodic moan. Not human, not wind. Like a song remembered by something that's never had lungs. Memory whales, the king murmurs, like a kid sneaking you into an exclusive treehouse. They only sing when someone down here remembers something worth hearing. You step into a cavern so vast it feels like the inside of a sleeping god. And there they are, giant silhouettes gliding above in lazy arcs, glowing faintly in purples and deep blues, like auroras dipped in whale fat. Each one is larger than a house and absolutely not following any real-world marine biology rules. One has antlers. Another seems to blink from the middle of its tail. One, rather magnificently, has an ancient Nubian flute embedded in its side, which it occasionally toots like it's testing its key. They collect memory fragments, the king says, usually emotional ones. Joy, grief, a really good meal. You nod, absorbing this like it's totally normal, which, weirdly, it's starting to feel like. One whale swims low, passing just over your head. You feel your hair lift slightly, like the air's been stirred by music, and suddenly you remember. Not a full scene, just you, younger, standing barefoot in hot sand. Someone behind you laughing, their shadow over yours. A string of cowrie shells pressed into your palm. That was mine, you whisper. The king nods. They're good at returning things when you need them. Now, here's the mainstream fact to anchor this delightful chaos. Ancient Nubian cultures, especially around the kingdom of Kush, had complex oral traditions tied deeply to ancestry, spiritual identity, and water. They believed rivers could carry not just bodies, but stories, entire legacies encoded in the currents. So the memory whales? Probably a dreamy extension of that concept. Like river spirits that evolved into bedtime monsters who collect your favorite moments and squish them into aquatic mixtapes. You look again. One whale surfaces slowly, this one bearing the cracked remnants of an old wooden tablet across its back. The writing's worn, unreadable, but you recognize the symbol etched in its side. That's from the temple by the third cataract. Good eye, the king says. That one's been carrying that piece for about 1,000 years. Picks up old promises, sometimes delivers them. You smile, touched in a place you didn't realize was bruised. And now, the quirky detail, right on cue. One whale suddenly does a slow-motion somersault midair. Yes, midair, because the ceiling above the dome isn't rock, it's water. Suspended somehow, like a mirror held gently over this entire world. The whale flips and lands with a whump that barely makes a ripple, then blows a bubble the size of your house. Inside the bubble, a single fish, wearing a tiny crown, looking extremely unimpressed. Don't ask, the king says. You don't. You walk further into the dome, where platforms of black stone float just above the floor, bobbing gently like lily pads. On each one you find artifacts: a comb, a scroll, a bone flute, a sandal, a half-eaten fig. Each item hums with faint light, not glowing like magic, more like memory, fireflies. These are echoes, the king explains, fragments that fell into the river long ago. The whales keep them in case the owners come looking. You reach for the fig, then pull your hand back. Still good? Debatable. At the far end of the dome is a spiral staircase that appears to descend into absolutely nothing. Just an inky black pool of mist, and maybe, if you squint, more whale. This way, the king says. You hesitate. What's down there? The reason I stayed. Oh, no pressure then. You descend. Step by step, the mist thickens. It doesn't feel cold exactly, more like the temperature of unsent letters and half-whispered names. You hear more voices now, soft, overlapping, like 1,000 lullabies sung in different dialects of longing. These are the memories that never happened, the king says, voice quieter. The choices never made, the loves not confessed, the babies never born, whole futures that got left on the riverbank. You stop. That's a lot, he nods. Some say they weigh more than real memories, denser, sadder, but sometimes sweeter too. You reach the bottom. There, floating in a circle of soft violet light, is a small carved boat, no longer than a bathtub. It's empty, but the cushion inside is still warm. She left in that, the king says. She? He nods. My sister. Told me she didn't belong on land or here. Said her place was where the stars touch the water. I didn't argue. She hated when I argued. You crouch beside the boat. There's a single ivory hairpin stuck between the cushions. Is she alive? The king shrugs. I think she became something else. A story, maybe. Or the reason water shivers at night. Archaeologists still debate whether Nubian royal lineages had spiritual split-offs. Siblings or cousins who weren't buried but honored through symbolic disappearance rites. You touch the side of the boat. It vibrates, just slightly, like it's remembering her too. The king looks at you, then past you, as if seeing the edge of something that hasn't happened yet. You're part of this now, you know, he says. Part of what? The forgetting, the remembering, the tide in between. You take a deep breath. Then, slowly, exhale. The boat rocks slightly. You stand again. The king nods toward the tunnel behind you, now glowing faintly gold. Come on, he says. I've got one more place to show you. You follow, each step lighter, as if you're being carried more than walking. The tunnel curves again, as if shaped by some ancient sea serpent that once called this place home and got distracted halfway through. The walls shift from dark stone to something glittering, crushed quartz maybe, or compressed tears of overly dramatic mermaids. Either way, they sparkle like they're trying to impress someone. You glance at the king. He's walking with purpose now, his trident leaving soft scorch marks on the ground like a torch dragging through velvet. We're close, he says, and though he doesn't smile, there's a tension easing from his shoulders. Close to what? You don't ask. You just keep walking. Eventually, you step into another chamber. This one is spherical, the walls carved smooth and lined with embedded bronze mirrors. There's no visible light source, but everything glows with a soft, warm shimmer, like the exact moment just before sunrise when the world holds its breath. In the center of the room, suspended in midair, because apparently that's normal now, is a slow-turning globe of water. Not a hologram, not a sculpture. Actual water, held in place like it's been bribed to behave. Inside the sphere floats a city. Not metaphorically. A real city. Miniature buildings, temples, causeways, aqueducts, even a little open market square. The whole thing rotates gently, casting wavy reflections across the chamber, like a dream that got caught in a soap bubble. That's Napata, the king says softly. Not how it was, how it could have been. Now we're dreaming into alternate histories. Mainstream historical fact break. Napata was the spiritual and political capital of the Kushite Empire in the 8th century BCE. It housed royal tombs, temples to Amun, and massive trade networks connecting sub-Saharan Africa with Egypt and the Mediterranean. It was a city of wealth, strategy, and sacred power. But here, in this quiet, water-suspended memory space, it's not bustling or grandiose. It's peaceful. No signs of conquest, no Egyptian incursion, no Roman gossip, just life. A woman baking bread, 2 kids chasing a chicken who looks like it might be winning, a priest napping against a column. Is this your dream? You whisper. The king shakes his head. Hers. His sister again. She imagined this place when she was little. Said if she ever ruled, she'd make a city where no one had to bow. You watch the chicken try to enter the temple and immediately get shooed away by a boy with an onion on his head like a helmet. Looks like she kept it casual. He smiles faintly. Yeah, she believed you could lead without being above. Quirky tidbit time. Ancient Nubian rulers often emphasize familial ties and egalitarian ideals in their iconography. Unlike some contemporaries, many Kushite queens, called Kandakes, ruled in their own right, not just as consorts. Some wore armor, others wrote poetry. One is rumored to have won a chariot race against a Greek envoy and then made him write about it in verse. You lean in closer. The floating city pulses slightly, then shows a different scene. The city at night. Instead of torches, everything's lit by these small glowing beetles that hover gently, illuminating walkways like nature's paper lanterns. How is it doing that, you ask? Dream logic, the king says. Don't fight it. Right. One of the mirrors flickers and briefly shows your own face. Not as you are now, but a version of you wrapped in linen robes, gold bangles up your arm, holding a ledger of trade routes. You look competent, respected, slightly sunburned. Alternate timeline, the king murmurs. That version of you ran a spice caravan from Meroe to Damascus, had 3 camels and a scandal with a musician. Sounds on brand, you say. The globe ripples again, and then it shudders, just slightly. The city inside dims. The king steps forward. No, not now. What's happening? Something's breaking through. Something real. And suddenly you feel it too. The cold edge of the waking world pressing in, like a draft under a locked door. A kind of thrum. A pulse. Not the rhythm of dreams, but of consequences. There's a reason she didn't want to rule, the king says, pacing now. She knew the dream would eventually draw attention. From who? He looks up at the mirrored ceiling where shadows start to dance. You'll see. The city inside the sphere starts to sink, like a melting scoop of serenity. Buildings dissolve. Beetles vanish. The chicken bolts for a side alley and disappears entirely. You panic. Can we stop it? He frowns. Maybe, but not from here. The floor begins to shift. The water sphere collapses into a column that drains through the center of the room and becomes a spiraling tunnel downward. He grips your shoulder. You still want to know the whole story? You hesitate, just long enough to remember the memory wails and the silent lullaby of unspoken futures. You nod. He sighs. Figures, hold your breath. And together, you dive. Straight into the glowing spiral. The mirrors shatter behind you. It feels like being flushed down the fanciest cosmic drainpipe imaginable. The water spiral doesn't just pull you downward, it spins you, wraps you in heat and light, and that weird cinnamon scent that keeps cropping up at the strangest times. You don't know if it's magical incense or just your brain short-circuiting from overstimulation. Either way, it's not unpleasant. When the spinning stops, you find yourself on your hands and knees, dripping and disoriented, on the floor of what looks like a throne room, but one built from coral, bone, and strange red glass that pulses faintly like a heartbeat. The king lands beside you, slightly more graceful, but still with that look people get when they've had enough of magical plumbing for one day. You look around. This is no dream. This is ancient and angry. The room is filled with statues, dozens of them, each twisted in a different pose of agony or ecstasy. It's hard to tell. One has a crown of snakes, another cradles a bowl filled with teeth. There's a child-sized one in the back that's holding a scroll, and if you squint, you swear it has your name written on it. Okay, that's mildly terrifying. The king nods. We've entered the vault of broken myths. Cool, 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 cool. He walks to the far end where a tall obsidian door stands sealed. Carved across it are words in Meroitic script, ancient Nubia's own language system, still not fully deciphered. You can read just enough to guess. No mortal truth survives the dream untouched. Mainstream historical fact. Meroitic script, used by the Kingdom of Kush from around 300 BCE to 400 CE, is one of the world's great linguistic mysteries. Despite hundreds of inscriptions and scholarly attempts, the full meaning of its text remains elusive. It's like a locked diary from an empire that refuses to whisper its secrets. The king touches the door, and it shudders open. Behind it, a vast chamber where water hovers in cubes. Yes, literal floating blocks, each one containing a suspended scene. Some flicker, some hum, some crackle with static. This is where abandoned legends go, he says. The ones that were believed once, then cast aside. Like dusty VHS tapes of mythological B-sides. You drift toward one cube showing a young man with gills teaching a classroom of crocodiles. In another, a woman with wings instead of arms dances while the stars rearrange themselves to mimic her movements. These are your people's myths? Some, he says. Others might be yours. You spot a cube showing a traffic jam of chariots, each driver yelling in ancient Greek about a 2-horse minimum. Another shows someone suspiciously resembling your uncle playing chess with a jackal-headed figure. Every time your uncle makes a move, the jackal steals a grape from his plate. Quirky tidbit. The Nubians didn't just absorb Egyptian gods, they adapted and fused them. For example, Apetamak, a lion-headed warrior god, had no equivalent in Egyptian belief. He was uniquely Kushite and often portrayed sitting peacefully and storming into battle in the same scene. As if even gods couldn't decide between brunch and war. The king pauses at a cube where a young girl whispers to a river. The water rises and listens. That one's hers, he says. His sister again. She believed that if you respected the Nile, it would speak to you. That its currents were memories. Not everyone agreed. Let me guess. People tried to silence her. He tilts his head. Some tried to marry her. Some tried to kill her. Some just tried to explain why she was wrong until she stopped talking. Yep, that tracks. You look at the cube. The river speaks back, soft waves forming symbols. Not letters, but meanings. Stay, breathe, begin again. Suddenly, the cube shakes. A crack forms. Then another. What's happening, you ask. The king stiffens. The myths are collapsing. Someone's rewriting history. Sure enough, another cube, the one with the crocodile classroom, bursts. Water floods out, turning into smoke before it hits the ground. Someone's trying to erase these, he growls. And if they reach hers, he doesn't finish. He just turns and starts sprinting deeper into the vault, past endless corridors of forgotten stories. You chase him. As you run, a question hits you like a thrown papyrus scroll. If dreams collapse when no one remembers them, what happens to dreamers? You turn a corner and find a platform. In the center stands a throne, unoccupied. But the throne responds to your gaze. Gold etchings shimmer. Cushions refluff themselves. A faint voice hums from somewhere in the frame. Is that hers? The king nods. It used to be. But she never sat in it. Why not? He doesn't answer. Instead, he reaches beneath the seat and pulls out a necklace, a small silver fish on a string. She gave this to me before she left, he says. Told me to use it when the story stopped making sense. And then, without asking your opinion on the matter, he presses it into your hand. It burns slightly, then glows. A sound echoes from behind you. Footsteps, heavy, measured, not human. The king's eyes go wide. They're here. Who? The editors. Oh, great. We've entered existential editorial territory. Run? No, he says. You sit. What? He points to the throne. You carry her memory now. You keep the story. I didn't sign up for... You did the moment you didn't turn back. And with that, he draws his trident and turns to face the oncoming shadows. You, heart pounding and hands shaking, sit on the throne. It sighs, and somewhere, deep beneath this ancient sea of lost ideas, a voice, familiar, female, calm, whispers. Finally, the throne hums beneath you, not like an engine, more like the echo of someone remembering your name just before they say it. A warmth spreads through the seat, up your spine, into the soft tissue behind your eyes. You blink, and then suddenly, you see, not with your eyes exactly, but with something older, primal, like bone memory. You see the king, your guide, your reluctant co-conspirator, standing at the gate of the vault, facing a growing tide of dark figures. The editors. Not quite human, not quite shadow. They move like oil spills and whispers, rearranging the air around them. Each carries a long red quill, and you get the creeping sense that if they touch you with it, you'll forget who you ever were. You grip the silver fish necklace tight. It pulses with tiny beats, like a heart, like a drum, like someone knocking politely on the door of your soul. From within the throne, a whisper. Write it again. You close your eyes, and the story begins to pour from you, not as words, but as water, flowing upward, outward, into the broken myths around you. The cubes begin to knit back together. The crocodile classroom reforms. The winged dancer rises again. Even the jackal chess game resets, although your uncle still seems to be losing. Mainstream historical fact. The kingdom of Kush was not just a carbon copy of Egypt. Its rulers, especially during the Napatan and Meroitic periods, created a unique fusion of African traditions, military prowess, and religious depth. Their queens, known as Candaces or Candaces, sometimes led armies and ruled in their own right. Greek and Roman historians were baffled by this matriarchal authority, which honestly says more about them than the Kushites. Back in the vault, the king lunges at the first editor, Steel meets script. The editor's quill sizzles against his trident. For a moment, reality seems to fray at the edges. Colors reverse. You hear someone humming Bohemian Rhapsody in ancient Nubian. One editor breaks from the pack and slinks toward you. Its quill hovers inches from your forehead. You remember your weird neighbor with the 3 goats? Yeah, if he'd ever tried this close-up psychic redaction move, you'd have politely handed him a lawn chair and asked him to chill. But this isn't him. This thing doesn't want to edit your grammar. It wants to delete your soul. You scream internally, and then reflexively reach for the floating cube beside you. Your hand sinks in, and suddenly, you are the legend. You're underwater, swimming beside a giant lion with gills, laughing. You're writing with a reed pen that spills light instead of ink. You're listening as the Nile speaks in haikus and bad dad jokes. You are the sister. It's you. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Nubian burial sites contain underwater artifacts, shells, fish bones, and even boats arranged symbolically. Some scholars think this signifies a belief in aquatic passage to the afterlife. Others argue it just rained a lot. Archaeologists still debate whether these water burials reflect actual ritual practice or are just a natural result of Nile flooding. Back in the vault, the editor snarls, but the moment you become the story, it recoils. Your voice, not your actual voice, but the part of you now entangled with this deep, mythic dream, speaks. You can't erase what remembers itself. The editor hisses and dissolves into a flurry of syllables. Like someone dropped a thesaurus into a paper shredder. The king grins. Told you the throne would suit you. You rise, not physically, but in a sort of narrative float, hovering now as the cubes around you glow bright and golden. Each one now holds not just a legend, but a heartbeat, a rhythm. And at the center of it all, that girl, your sister self, stands by the river, whispering her secrets. You watch her grow, command waves, bend storm clouds, trick crocodiles into performing ballet. You feel every moment as if you've lived it twice. Then comes the part that hurts, the day she vanished. No fanfare, no warning. Just one last whisper to the river. Tell them I still dream. And gone. The king walks to your side. She didn't die, he says quietly. She became memory. Can we bring her back? Only if we carry her forward. A cube flickers nearby. It shows you now, seated on the throne, holding a necklace, unsure but glowing. A loop, a gift, a warning, probably all 3. The king touches your shoulder. There's one more place we have to go. Oh no, you say. Please, not another underwater portal. My ears still haven't popped, he chuckles. Number this time. You walk. A path unfolds beneath you, carved into the vault's floor, lined with whispering reeds and golden beetles that clatter softly like maracas on Ambien. You take a deep breath and step forward. The throne fades behind you. The editors retreat. The myths rebuild. And somewhere, maybe not too far away, your sister's laughter echoes like a ripple in glass. The path feels warm under your feet. Not hot, not burning, just that perfect sun-soaked stone sensation, like when you accidentally nap on a balcony and wake up weirdly refreshed. It winds downward, spiraling through the heart of the vault. The walls pulse with slow-moving hieroglyphs, each one telling a fragment of a legend that maybe never was, or maybe always has been. You pass images of lions dancing with storks, crocodiles sewing tunics, and a very smug ibis making soup. This feels less like an ancient ruin and more like the inside of a myth that's been doodled on by a bored god with a crayon addiction. Beside you, the king is unusually quiet. Where are we going now, you ask? Because clearly, you've forgotten that every time you've asked that, something bananas has happened. He answers, to the root of her story. Whose? He gives you that look. The one your mom gave you when you asked where babies come from, and she panicked and handed you a biology textbook upside down. She was the legend, he says, but even legends grow from somewhere. You descend through another arch, this one shaped like a lotus in mid-bloom. The air thickens, not in a scary way, more like walking into a library that's also a spa. And then you see it, a subterranean lake glowing faintly green, not slime green, dream green. At its center, an islet. On that islet, a hut, a fire, and a figure, cloaked and still, stirring something in a clay pot. You paddle across in a tiny boat shaped like a catfish. The figure looks up. It's an old woman, except she's also the girl, and the king, and you, all at once. She smiles like she's waiting for you to finally get the joke. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Nubian spirituality, ancestor reverence and cyclical identity were deeply ingrained. The same spirit could reappear in different lives, roles, or even species, some being reborn as animals, others as weather patterns. This idea of spiritual recursion, rebirth not just of bodies, but of stories, is found in burial inscriptions and oral tradition. She ladles something into a bowl and hands it to you. It smells like honey, river mint, and long naps. You sip. Suddenly, you remember everything, not just from this journey, but from lifetimes stitched together by water, salt, and whispers. You remember being the girl who vanished, the king who searched, the river who listened, even the crocodile who composed lullabies in his spare time. You were all of them. You are all of them. Your feet lift slightly off the ground, not floating exactly, just detaching from the need for up and down. Why? You whisper. The old you her smiles. Because stories want to be told and retold and remembered differently each time. Quirky tidbit. In several Nubian myths, there are references to shape-shifting not just into animals, but into abstract forces like a breeze that flirts with fire or a heartbeat in a jealous drum. Modern scholars often dismiss these as metaphorical, but Nubian oral historians sometimes describe these transformations as literal. Archaeologists still debate whether this reflects poetic storytelling or a different perception of reality entirely. You sit by the fire. The king kneels beside you. He places something in your palm, a small carved charm. A fish, again, but this one is sleeping. You'll forget when you leave, he says. Everything? Number just the parts that would make your taxes impossible to file. You chuckle, and for a second, the myth feels like your backyard, familiar, playful, real. Why did the girl disappear, you ask? She didn't, he replies. She let go of one story to become another. And now? She's ready to be remembered, not as tragedy, but as possibility. You watch the fire. It flickers, bends, then reshapes into the image of the girl, arms outstretched, laughing, made of stars and river foam. You're not scared. You're not confused. You're just here, present. The old woman nods and begins to hum, a tune that sounds like lullabies and thunder mixed together, a sound that doesn't need a language. You hum along. The lake starts to rise, not flood, just gently lift, like a curtain call. Everything around you begins to fade, not die, not disappear, just shift frequencies, like turning the dial on an ancient radio that only picks up myth stations. Time to go, you ask? Almost. There's one last cube left. It floats toward you, glowing faintly. You press your palm to it. It doesn't open a new memory. It becomes a mirror. You see yourself, not just as you are, but as you've been. The storyteller, the swimmer, the seeker, the sister. It clicks shut and settles gently into your chest. You'll know what to do, the king says, when the moment comes. And you believe him. Because the truth is, every legend needs someone to carry it. And it turns out, you've been training for this your whole life. The water doesn't rise so much as it reshapes around you, flowing up like a reverse waterfall, cradling your body in a gravity-defying spiral. The fire on the islet remains untouched, flickering steadily as the lake lifts you and the king together, up and up and up until the ceiling of the cavern begins to glow with constellations you're fairly certain haven't existed for a few thousand years, and maybe never did. Don't look down, the king murmurs. You do anyway. The lake has vanished. The vault is gone. You're standing, well, floating maybe, above a desert, but not the one you started in. This one's greener, wetter, teeming with life and strange smells. Thick acacia trees sway where dunes once were. Elephants splash in a distant pool, and in the sky above, two suns blink like eyes after a nap. Time, evidently, has gone on vacation without permission. The king gestures toward a series of low hills. That, he says, is where the first forgetting happened. You squint. A small structure sits nestled between the hills. It's humble, just stones and sticks, but it pulses with the same dream green hue as the lake below. Inside, a figure scribbles something on papyrus. They don't notice you watching. It's her again. The girl. The old you-her legend. She's writing your story before it happens. Wait, you whisper. Does she know? She's remembering it forward, he replies. You laugh because your brain is now completely off the leash. You don't even care anymore that this makes zero chronological sense. You're practically a philosophy major at this point. Mainstream historical fact. Nubian record-keeping, though not as widely preserved as Egyptian, existed in sophisticated oral and material forms. Some evidence suggests that early Nubian societies maintained story libraries, designated elders who memorized multiple versions of key legends, adjusted for audience, season, and political climate. It was an evolving form of authorship, where facts were honored but flexible. You approach the hut. The air grows warmer like summer's breath on your cheek. Inside, you, pauses mid-sentence and looks up. You're early, she says with a wink. Sorry, you reply. Traffic in the underworld was terrible. She grins and hands you the papyrus. It's blank. Is this mine to write? She shrugs. Or rewrite. You glance back at the king, who's now sitting on a stool made of cloud. He's playing something like a harp, except the strings are lines of text. So this was the legend? You ask. Not quite, the girl says. You were the legend. Quirky tidbit. A Nubian folk belief persists in parts of modern-day Sudan that names, if spoken backwards during certain moon phases, can open portals to alternate timelines. Some parents deliberately gave their children palindromic names to confuse the spirits and ensure their child would slip through fate's cracks unharmed. The papyrus begins to fill itself. You don't write, you remember. Every word is something you've already done, but haven't done yet. Every line is a callback, a punchline, a prophecy in lowercase. The girl writer you nods, satisfied. Well, go on then, she says. You've got a long walk home. Home. That sounds weirdly tempting now. Will I remember all this? Not all, just enough to keep things interesting. You step outside. The stars overhead are forming a fish again. This one's swimming through the sky. You smile. Thanks, you say to no one in particular. Or maybe to yourself. She waves, already scribbling the next part of someone else's myth. The king appears beside you. Well? Well, you echo. I think I'm ready. He touches your forehead gently, like a goodbye and a beginning wrapped in one. You blink, and the hut vanishes. The sky dims. Your feet touch ground. Sand. Real sand this time. Dry, warm, familiar. You're back where it all started. Except it isn't where it started at all. It's where you get to decide what to do next. The king is gone. The girl is a song humming in the back of your thoughts. The fish sleeps in your pocket. And the cube, the final one, is gone because it was never separate from you. Archaeologists still debate whether the Nubian king who lived underwater was a real monarch, a metaphor, or a dream shared by generations. Some argue his legend was simply a warning. Others insist he was the guardian of lost truths, surfacing only when the world forgot how to imagine. But here's what you know, deep in your bones. He existed the moment you believed he could. And maybe, just maybe, that's all a legend ever needs. You're still standing in the sand when the wind picks up, a lazy, shuffling breeze that doesn't seem in a rush to get anywhere. It rustles your hair, brushes your cheeks like a sleepy aunt, and nudges your shoulders as if to say, "Okay, dreamer, time to walk." And so you do. You walk. The sun has that honey gold glow again, but this time it feels like it's saying goodbye instead of hello. The dunes stretch on forever, and your legs move without effort, like they've been doing this 1,000 years already. You're not walking toward anything in particular. That's kind of the point now. You've outgrown the map. You're not a player in the story anymore. You're the one holding the pen, or at least the fish. You reach into your pocket and feel the little bronze figurine. Still warm, still humming. It's changed a bit. Maybe sleeker, maybe wiser, maybe more yours. There's something comforting about that. Mainstream historical fact. The Nubians developed advanced metallurgy, particularly in bronze and ironwork, long before it became widespread elsewhere in Africa. Fish motifs appeared frequently in their jewelry, pottery, and grave goods, possibly symbolizing transformation, guidance, or rebirth. Somewhere on your left, the horizon hiccups. A mountain rises, not suddenly, more like it had always been there and just decided to stop being shy. At the top, something glitters. You roll your eyes because, of course, the story isn't quite done yet. You climb it. Each step is familiar. The kind of familiar that prickles your memory but refuses to give details. You've never been here before, but your bones argue otherwise. At the summit, you find her again. The girl, the old you, the scribe of impossible timelines. She's older now, or younger, or just better lit. She's sitting at the edge, tossing small rocks into the wind. They float for a second, then transform into fireflies and vanish. You sit beside her. "You kept going," she says, not looking at you. "I didn't know I had a choice," you reply. "That's the trick," she smirks. "No one does, until they do." She hands you a final papyrus. This one isn't blank. It's filled with tiny symbols, drawings, words, glyphs that pulse with a rhythm that feels familiar. "Is this my ending?" she shrugs. "Or your beginning? Depends on which side you start reading from." You tuck the scroll under your arm and stand up. The desert below glows like it swallowed the stars. The whole sky is holding its breath. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Nubian legends claim that the soul does not leave the body upon death. It moves to the bones of the next person who needs it most. That's why warriors were sometimes buried under village thresholds, to pass their courage on to anyone who stepped overhead. You don't say goodbye, you just nod. The girl, you, waves lazily, already humming another myth into being. You start down the mountain, scroll in hand, fish in your pocket, starlight in your lungs. And now, dear listener, it's your turn. Because this story, this very strange, wet, fish-themed, time-looping Nubian fever dream, was never really mine to tell. It was yours. From the moment you hit play. From the moment you lean back, dim the lights, and gave yourself permission to drift. Archaeologists still debate whether there ever truly was a Nubian king who lived beneath the waters. Some say he was an invention, an ancient bedtime story told to unruly children who refused to sleep. Others claim he was real, immortal even, glimpsed only by those willing to trade their questions for dreams. But whether he ruled a sunken palace or merely your imagination makes no difference now. You met him, you wandered, you remembered, and maybe, just maybe, you changed. So now, as the desert fades and the last traces of moonlight begin to melt into the folds of your thoughts, you return gently to yourself, to the softness of your pillow, the hush of your room, the warmth that wraps around you like the folds of an ancient robe. You can still feel the hum of the fish in your pocket, can't you? Still smell the sweet haze of the fig groves you passed. Still see the girl's smile, your smile, somewhere at the edge of memory. You've journeyed through underwater vaults and living pyramids. You've spoken with kings, befriended birds that never existed, and stood in the footprints of stories carved before time had calendars. And now, you rest. Let your mind carry the flickers of this journey wherever it wishes. Let it reshape your dreams into something gently absurd, quietly profound, or maybe just weird enough to make you chuckle when you wake. This world will still be here tomorrow. But for now, let sleep take over. Let your breath slow. Let your limbs soften. Let every sound fade to a velvet hush. You're safe. You're whole. And somewhere beneath the surface of your dreams, the Nubian king nods once more and returns to his palace of stars.